Okay, in this video we're going to go through how to change the saw blade on a SawTek Pro system. We're going to start by gathering a couple of scraps of plywood, a small one to go inside the saw cabinet itself, and then another one to rest the blade on when we get it outside. We're going to start by getting the Arbor Pin, the little aviator pin that hangs inside the box, and we're going to lock out that shaft that you can see there. In just a moment the video will go inside, and we're going to look for the hole on top of the shaft and line it up with that bracket, and then we're going to insert the aviator pin inside that bracket to lock the arbor in place. And that's going to allow us to remove the nut on the outside. So he's going to lock that into place, and then he's going to remove his magnets and get his saw wrench and move it to the other side. That little scrap of plywood is going to drop down into the bottom of the cavity. That's very important to protect the saw blade so that metal doesn't break the teeth off the bottom of the saw. So once that plywood is in place, he's going to put his saw wrench on there and then use the palm of his hand to strike that nut and get it to come loose. Now it shouldn't need a hammer to come off of there. It might need a light tap with maybe a dead blow mallet, but usually your palm is more than enough to break that loose. So he's going to go ahead and remove that nut and that washer that holds the saw blade in place. Now that washer has two sides. It has a flat side and it has a milled side. And you want to make sure, and he's going to show us here in a second, you want to make sure that that milled side goes back towards the blade. You'll see when he turns it that there's an indentation cut in it. It's important that that go, right there's the groove, that must go against the blade when you reinstall it. So we're going to set that out of the way. Now we're going to put our magnets on at approximately 9 and 3 o'clock. He'll put those magnets on and then be able to slide that blade back up off the arbor. When he gets it to the end of the shaft, he's going to lift up and then gently lower it down onto that piece of plywood. Now that plywood's real important because right now that blade, which weighs quite a bit, is resting on that. So he's going to remove his magnets now and then gently work the blade out the front of the saw. It's also very important to wear gloves while doing this, and it kind of goes without saying, but I'll mention it here. This machine must be locked out when this happens. You must never do work like this without locking out the machine. So we have the machine locked out and tagged out with the appropriate lock and tag. Now he's going to roll this out the front, being careful not to make contact with the metal. Once he gets it enough to where he can get two hands on it, we're going to take it out of the cabinet and lower it down and set it on the I-Joist. Okay, now we can put it on a pallet or we can ship it to be returned and get our new saw blade and repeat the process. Okay, as you can see here, the saw teeth that are facing up are pointing toward the back of the saw. It's very important. You can see Jody is pointing to that now. Those teeth will always, the upper teeth must always face the back of the saw. That saw always rotates in that direction, whether the blade's on that side or the other side. So that piece of plywood scrap is still inside the cabinet. He's gently lowering that back, using that to guide it. He's moving it past the arbor with that plywood in place. He's going to get it past the arbor, and then he's going to put his magnets back on each side. So there's got his first magnet on and a second. He's going to slide it back. Once he's got it below the shaft, lift it up and push it into place. He's going to gently slide it onto the arbor, push it until it seats to the other washer. You can, once again, make sure that you choose the right side of the washer. You can see the flat side, there's no milling, no groove. The other side there is. He's going to clean that off, make sure there's no debris on there. And go ahead and reinstall it onto the arbor. Get the nut back. Now this is what they call a reverse thread nut. it spins in the opposite thread of a conventional thread, and the reason for that is that that saw motor is spinning from his position. It's spinning counterclockwise. That nut tightens clockwise. That means that whenever force is applied to the blade and it's turning, the nut will get tighter. Now he's going to go ahead and tighten the nut up, place the wrench at 1 o'clock. The arbor pin's still in place. He's going to hit it with a palm a couple of times, put that back on there, check it once again. That is as tight as it needs to be. You do not need to tighten that with a hammer. So now that he's got that, he's going to go and make sure that you remove the arbor pin. It's the very next thing you want to do. You don't want to leave that in place if the machine were to start. Reinstall the tools, put them back on the inside of the hook, and then go ahead and reinstall your doors on the front and side of the machine. Now while you're going through this procedure, you should look around for any metal shavings or debris that might indicate damage. Anytime you've got the doors off the saw, you should be doing an examination and cleaning inside to make sure that there's not been any damage. We're going to remove our scrap wood, get it out of the way, and then reinstall our panels, and that's the process for changing a saw blade.